Greetings all. I, like you, no doubt, am a tad bit restless. I'm ready to move on, but in the exercise of due caution, we're all kind of thrown into a stay put. I have opportunity to go out. I'm pulling 2 shifts in the next couple of days to get out there as a police officer and work a testing station. I know people are ill. They're anxious to discover if it has anything to do with the virus. Strange times, to be sure. And we can find ourselves bounced around a little bit. It is what it is, you know, and this calls for the endurance of the saints. I really do believe that we are going to see the other end of this, and hopefully in short order, sooner than later. You know, I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know all this stuff. I don't have all the facts. I am trusting our leaders. Pleased, by the way, how individuals are acting in our best interest. And so, you know, I'm following orders and like you, just staying put. Are in the 6th chapter of the book of Leviticus, and though it's not so much the object of the author's intention in this week's parasha Vayikra, which is the first 5 chapters, it's worth underscoring again that Levites weren't just you know, religious leaders making sacrifices. Now, to be sure, that's what we're looking at in this week's portion. The word Leviticus, Vayikra in Hebrew, means those called out. And they were called out to the sacred in the sanctuary, but they were also called out to be health inspectors, building inspectors, physicians, if you will, and jurists. They really did serve the community in so many ways. And the need to have competent people to attend to health-related affairs, as these individuals did. If you look at the Torah code with diet, with various health requirements, dealing with disease and plague, it's all in there. It gives a little more credence to the literature. But here, we're in a section of the literature that deals with transgression and sacrifice in response to it in the context of making an atonement. And I'm interested in the 5th chapter, and I want you to see how making a sacrifice to the Lord in response to a particular sin isn't good enough. And I want to show you how Jesus said as much. In chapter 5, verses 20 through 26, we're going to look at not atonement, but something attached to it, a prerequisite for it, actually, in this case. It's restitution. Moses says, the Lord says in verse 21, suppose someone commits a sin who deals falsely with his neighbor. He's disingenuous, she's disingenuous, they're lying, they're crafty, deceitful, in a matter of a deposit or a pledge of hands as a financial transaction someone was sneaky with, or through robbery, that is overtly just seizing it from someone, or has extorted from his neighbor, or has found what was lost and lied about it, swearing falsely, so sinning in one of any of these things that a man may do. And whether you found someone's money and you knew who it was, and you lied about it to keep it, or whatever, there's different ways that people take advantage of people. In verse 23, then it will be that when he has sinned and has become guilty, he must restore what he took by robbery or what he got by extortion. That is to say, if you have pangs of conscience, it's not good enough just to say, oh Lord, I've sinned, I'm sorry. That's important. But first, before you even get to that, you need to go to the person and say, listen, I've sinned, I'm sorry, and restore what it is. We're told in verse 23, he must restore. And then again in verse 24, he is to restore it in full. And here's the point, and add a 5th part more to it. That is, you know, if you took $100, it's not yours. You don't just give the money back. You give back the money, the $100 plus 20 added to it. You make restitution. He must give it to the one to whom it belongs in the day of presenting his trespass offering. Now, the assumption here is that someone feels guilty about what they did. oh, I have the pangs of conscience, and oh Lord, forgive me for what I did to so-and-so. It's not acceptable to just go to the Lord and say, Lord, please forgive me for what I did to so-and-so. It's not the way the game is played. It doesn't work that way. If I understand him correctly, and he's clear, before you go to the Lord, and we'll see this in a second, before you go to the Lord, you go to the person. You own the moment and say, listen, my bad, I sinned, I'm sorry, here it is. But you don't just give back what you took, you add to it. It's not only owning the moment and restoring what was seized, but it's adding something on top. It's interesting. And by the way, we live in a world today where that's not at play. People wrong each other all the time and then just slip into the darkness. They just slip into the big city, and they just, people can screw things up in a church and they just leave and they just go somewhere else. People can do wrong to people in relationships and they just divorce them and cut loose and go push a reset button with someone else, and the buyer beware, you don't quite know what you're getting. In any case, there's a premium here on making right what you did wrong in advance of going to the Lord. He says you should do this. That is, you go make it right with the person, you give the restitution, and you do that on the day when you bring your offering. Then having attended to that, then in verse 25, he is to bring his trespass offering to Adonai, etc. And then in verse 26, the Kohen or the priest will make atonement for him before the Lord, and he will be forgiving concerning whatever he may have done to become guilty. Interesting. Absent in social intercourse today in the way that we interact with each other. But if you'll permit me, and I don't know why you wouldn't, if I was just giving a little homiletical exposition in a garden variety Jewish synagogue, we could just stop here and talk about ethics. But this isn't a garden variety Jewish synagogue, it's a Messianic Jewish place, so we can look at the Older Testament and push it forward and see if there's anything in the New, and there is. If you look at the Sermon on the Mount, and this is the basic constitution for what it means to be Christian, in chapter 5, verses 23 and 24, Yeshua, Jesus, says that if you're about to make a gift at the altar and you realize there's a problem between you and another brother, you go make it right and then come and offer your gift. It's the same principle. Relationships are important, and as I bring this to a close, I want to just underscore, as much as I think our relationships with the Lord are important, and we tend to privatize that excessively. People in today's culture talk about my personal relationship with Jesus, my private relationship with Jesus. And while we do well to have a personal and private relationship with Jesus, it's helpful to understand that our relationship with the Lord is indeed personal, but it's not private. That is, it entails the way that we interact with other people. And we interact with other people in a different way, and that's what distinguishes us. What distinguishes me from another person isn't necessarily the way that I dress. I hopefully look like a normal person. I'm not out of this world. I know I'm a little different. What distinguishes us is less the way we dress, and it's more the way we operate. We operate with a certain value, a certain premium that we place on virtue and community, and we do that mindful of the fact that Jesus is on record underscoring the importance of loving others, which means do good on behalf of them. We are sheep singular, but there's no such thing as an individual sheep. We got to be part of a sheepfold. I believe in St. Augustine was right when he says, if you don't have a church as your mother, you probably don't have a God as your father. Because it really is, it's a family business. And so many people in life are alone. They are individualized, fractured in modernity, and living for themselves, by the way. But then we receive the Lord, and then we get converted out of that. And we realize life isn't just a me thing, it's a we thing. And thus the way that we treat others, what we do is indeed important. Take that message to the bank. If you need to make it right, make it right. If you need to make restitution to someone, do it in principle. It's good to be giving. And if you need to do that, do that. Let me just say in closing, I've received an inquiry or two. How come I don't post how people can tithe and give? If someone wants to do that, you can, Google, Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace, Arlington. Go to the the website, and you'll see a donate button. Do it like that. But hey, listen, love you bunches, and you be blessed. Take care. Bye-bye.